Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In our last video, we successfully integrated Firebase authentication and Firestore CRUD operations using Flutter bloc. If you haven't checked that video yet, you can find the link in the description. But what happens when there's no internet? Well, today we are taking it a step further. We are making our app work offline. To do that, we need to tackle two key challenges. Number one, making authentication work offline. Number two, reading data offline. So let's dive right in. First up, offline authentication. The plan is simple. When a user logs in while online, we will securely store their email and hashed version of their password in secure storage. Then, when the user tries to log in, we check. If the internet is available, we log in the user normally. If the internet is not available, we compare their entered credentials with the locally stored ones and log them in offline. This way, user can still access the app even when they are completely offline. Next, let's make sure our data is available offline. Whenever we fetch data from Firestore while online, we will store it locally using SQFlight. Later, when a user opens the app, we check. If the internet is available, fetch data from Firestore as usual. If the internet is not available, read and display data from the local data instead. Now, one important thing to note. We are not enabling create or delete operations in offline mode. Since modifying data offline can cause conflicts, we will keep our focus on just reading data while offline. Now, let's check out the changes we have to make in the code for the offline feature to work. Let's first check out the new files that we had to create. So in the utils, I created 3 files: connection, database helper, and secure storage. And in the models, I created user model. So let's first check the code of user model. So this is our user model. This is very similar to the properties are very similar to the one that we have in Firestore user model. But we have added some factory methods which were missing in the Firebase user model. Like here you can see we have copy with, we have from user, we have from JSON, we have to JSON. So these factory methods are important to store data and store security credentials and basically storing the user model. Okay, now let's move on to the other 3 classes we have created. So this is the connection class, and this is basically a singleton pattern class, and it is basically to check the internet connectivity, whether the user is online or offline, and because the connectivity status will remain same throughout the app, so we created it using singleton pattern. Next, we have database helper. So database helper has all the CRUD methods, whether we want to get data, or we want to create new data, or we want to delete data, or we want to delete all the data. So this is basically for storing the items or the list of things, list of data that we are showing on home page. Next, we created a secure storage class. This is for uh, persisting of the uh, sensitive data of user like login credentials, use email, password, etc. Here we are encrypting the data, the sensitive data like password, and then we are storing it. So these are the new files or classes that we had to create in order to implement the offline feature. Next, let's go through the modification thing, the code that we modified in order to implement the offline feature. So if you check in the main.dart file, we have first we are initializing the connection and the secured storage, and we are getting the last logged in user. Next, in this main.dart itself, in the checkout status class, checkout status widget, we are checking if the user is online. If user is online, then we are performing the normal steps that we did in our previous video. If the user is offline, then we are checking if the last logged in user is null. If the user is null, then we are redirecting the user to login screen, or we are just rendering the login screen. If the user last logged in user is not null, in that case we have the user details and we are rendering the home screen with the last logged in user details. Also we are setting the state. We are emitting the if auth event, and in the if auth event we are setting the state as authenticated. So this is one modification that we did in main.dart. Then in the auth block, let's check the code in auth block. Here we have auth block. In auth block, in the sign in event, again we are checking if user is online or offline. If user is online, then we are performing the same steps that we did in our previous video. In case the user plus we are doing one more thing, is that we are persisting the user's email and user's password using the storage class that we created earlier. So after user is logged in using Firebase, their credentials are being stored locally, and then user is authenticated. Now if the user is offline, then we are getting the same credentials that we stored earlier, that is the email, and we are also checking if the password entered by the user matches the one that is there with us stored locally. And if the credentials match, then we are emitting the authenticated state, and also making setting the is offline to true. If if user credential doesn't match, then we are throwing email or password is incorrect error. That is being handled by auth error state. So then the state is set to auth error, and the error message is being also passed as string. So this is what is happening in auth block, that the code changes that we have done. And finally we have made changes in the fetch item event. So let's go to item block. Here I have my item block, and in the fetch item event we are again checking the connection, if the connection is online or offline. Again, if the connection is online, then we are performing normal steps. But one more thing that we are doing is that we are inserting all the items in the database, and if and when the connection is offline, then we are fetching the same data and we are rendering to the user. Now let's go to the login screen because we have made some changes in login screen as well. So if I go to login screen, here we have the same code, same steps that we were doing in the last video, but here again we have some changes. So what here we are doing is that again we are checking if user is online or offline. If user is online, then again we are performing same steps using Firebase, but if user is offline, okay, one more step that we are performing is that if user is online, then we are storing the user details locally, and if user is offline, then again we are getting that same user detail that we stored earlier, and we are redirecting the user to home screen with the user detail. So in the online condition, the user is being redirected with the user details that we are getting from Firebase, but in offline condition we are getting user details that we are getting from the local storage, the secured local storage. So that's it. That's all the changes that we have done, and now we can go ahead and check the code in action. Okay, so let's check the status of the internet. So currently we see that the Wi-Fi is on and the mobile data is also on. So first we will log out the user and log in the online state. So okay, so the online login is working perfectly, and when we log in the online state, then the user credentials are that time persisted along with the user details and also the items list. And let's now log out and let's turn off the internet. Let's turn off Wi-Fi as well as mobile data, and now let's check the app. Okay, even when the net is not available, then also user is able to log in, and also the list of items are getting fetched. So I think our app is working great even when the internet is not there, and they are able to authenticate as well as the items are getting listed. And that's it. With these changes, our Flutter app will seamlessly handle offline authentication and data access. Again, if you haven't seen the previous video, the link is in the description. Make sure to check it out. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss an update. Drop a comment below if you have any questions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one. Bye bye and happy coding.